Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining today's Ternary webinar, 5 Ways to Achieve Cloud Cost Savings. My name is Marie Burke, and I'm Director of Product Marketing at Ternary, and I'm joined today by my co-presenter, Hayden. Hayden, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name's Hayden Singh. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Ternary, and been around for quite a while. So excited to show off some of the platform for you.
Yes, Hayden has been with Ternary for quite some time, and I joined back in January. I can't believe how quickly the year has flown by, but it's a very exciting time to be in the FinOps market. Here's a quick glance at the agenda for today's session. We'll go over an overview of Ternary for those of you who may not be familiar with us, and then we'll dive into the meat of the presentation focused on cost savings and different techniques that you can apply, whether you are a direct customer or perhaps a managed service provider partner working with customers. And then I'll hand things over to Hayden and he'll demo how we can actually do some of these cost savings techniques within the Ternary platform. And then lastly, we'll wrap things up with a couple of Ternary's differentiators. So to start with an overview of Ternary, Ternary is a FinOps certified platform, and it is a multi-cloud platform by nature. We do manage more than 7 billion in cloud spend under management. And this is a pretty standard statistic that you'll see across different vendors in this market. We are very proud of 7 billion given our high growth velocity as a startup in this market. And we are a purpose-built platform for FinOps. And for those of you who may be familiar with the market, there are different generations of FinOps solutions. There are the first generation of tools that were created 10 plus years ago. And then right around the time of the pandemic is when Ternary was founded. And we really focused on, really adhering to that FinOps framework and being very intentional about the platform and capabilities we're delivering for customers and partners who want to build and operate a FinOps practice. You'll see in the slide here just a few of our customers and partners that we like to call out. Linux Foundation, for example, is a multi-cloud customer co-presented with us at FinOps X San Diego back in June. And their story is really unique because they have a build and buy approach. And so they're adding Ternary into some of the existing systems and applications that their company has built. And Rackspace is another example. This is a managed service provider partner, and they work with us to build and deliver FinOps services for their Google Cloud customers. In total, we have over 300 customers, and this is across direct business as well as our partner ecosystem. I want to start with making a distinction between cost management and FinOps. As I alluded to a few moments ago, there are different generations of tools in this market. And it's really important to understand that along with those tools, there are different approaches to managing cloud spend. The original first generation was really focused on cost management. You may also hear cost management or cost optimization as part of that as well. And this has become more of a siloed and reactive approach. Perhaps your company overshot their budget. Perhaps, there is a mandate coming down from the top, asking you to identify areas for savings. And there's a lot of belt tightening that has gone on over the years, and to this day, due to the broader economic climate. The emphasis really has been on reducing cloud spend, and many companies have focused on technical capabilities and tactics to help them identify those savings opportunities. Where FinOps is different is that it's really focused on driving a cost-conscious culture, and it's a more collaborative and proactive approach. Cost management has historically been tackled by operations and engineering teams, but FinOps opens up a whole new breadth of personas: procurement, finance, product owners, executives, along with many allied personas from IT asset management, security, and sustainability teams. And the emphasis here is really on maximizing the business value of cloud. Now, of course, today's session is about cost savings, so we're not saying cost savings and spend reduction isn't important. But I do want to make it clear that FinOps is a much bigger practice than just that one component of cost savings and optimization. Let's get into the expectation versus reality. Forgive these very simplistic mock-ups here, but when we talk to customers and partners about cost savings, a lot of folks are interested in what can you save me year over year, quarter over quarter. And as the saying goes, mileage may vary. So there is no, silver bullet or magic wand for achieving cost savings. Now there are definitely different savings tactics and approaches that you can implement. But from my experience, and Hayden, feel free to chime in, I've never seen someone's cloud spend, take a complete nosedive like this image is showing. Now, the reason for this is because, many organizations are achieving savings and then reinvesting that savings in more strategic initiatives. So, Hayden, have you ever seen something like this on the left-hand side here?
Very, very rarely. Oftentimes when you're spending in the cloud, when you are seeing your cloud costs go up, it is a little bit scary, but it generally means that you have healthy growth within the company and that you as a company and organization are growing. So we tend to try to see the opposite of exactly that.
Yes, thank you. And so here's our reality on the right-hand side. And of course, there are going to be different views depending on your organization. But yes, perhaps you do have a fair amount of waste to start, and that's what that initial decline is for. But then over your time, as your business is growing, perhaps you're releasing new applications, you're investing in new initiatives and experiments with AI, you'll still continue to see that cloud spend trajectory going up. And it's really about maximizing the efficiency here. So just want to level set and kind of give a caution to folks that are exploring solutions and platforms in the market. If there are vendors out there that are guaranteeing significant savings year over year, without having these tailored conversations about your business dynamics and your expectations and growth rate, then I would take it with a grain of salt because it is very hard to make those guarantees and promises without knowing someone's architecture and environment. That brings us to 5 ways to achieve cloud cost savings. Now, these are just 5 examples, is definitely not an all-inclusive list of cost savings tactics. A few I won't include today include bill validation against what your cloud provider bill is saying, as well as things like lights on, lights off policies for non-production environments. So those are just 2 other examples that I'm not going to touch on in this list. But here are what I would consider perhaps maybe some of the top 5 most common ways to achieve cloud cost savings. First and foremost, negotiating cloud provider pricing agreements. Each of the major cloud providers has their own flavor of these types of commitment agreements. So those could be Google Cloud Commits, Microsoft Customer Agreements, AWS Enterprise Discount Programs. And there are a few other, different pricing agreements that each of these cloud providers may have, but those are some of the most common. And these can be especially beneficial for organizations and companies with significant amount of cloud spend, or if you're still migrating over to the cloud, being more proactive about establishing these agreements, forecasting and taking into account what your projected consumption would be. These agreements are often under a non-disclosure. They can be also considered private pricing arrangements, and it will involve multiple stakeholders across your organization. And again, this is the beauty of FinOps. So you'll want to bring in your procurement teams, your finance teams for those negotiations, but you also need your FinOps practitioners and your engineering teams who have the understanding of the historical cloud consumption and can help forecast that growth. And so you can maximize that coverage throughout the term of that agreement. And depending on the size of your organization, the cloud spend, these agreements can be a significant amount of money. So you'll likely need executive buy-in and sign off as well. Second tactic here is eliminating zombie infrastructure. And the State of FinOps report 2024, published by the FinOps Foundation earlier this year, highlighted for the first time that reducing waste was the #1 priority for FinOps practitioners. And eliminating zombie infrastructure is what I would consider the low-hanging fruit tactic within that larger usage optimization umbrella. So zombie infrastructure, also referred to as idle or unused, unattached infrastructure, are kind of your quick wins for cost savings. And these can be, unattached, storage volumes. It could be old snapshots that can be retired. There are many different areas and services that fall into this category, but definitely some quick wins here. In terms of personas that would take action on zombie infrastructure is primarily going to be your engineering team, with some contributions, of course, from your FinOps practitioners, depending on if the FinOps team sits within finance, operations, or engineering. But your engineering team will be the ones who would take action against these zombies. Dovetailing nicely off of zombie infrastructure is the ability to right-size resources. So it's very important to, consistently analyze your utilization metrics over time. And depending on what service you're looking at, that might be, CPU, memory, disk. And right sizing is available across a multitude of services for each of the cloud providers. So it could be compute services, storage, Kubernetes, databases, so on and so forth. And so again, this is an example of a usage optimization tactic. And the focus really is on improving the efficiency of your resources. And savings just happens to be a really great benefit of that. Also worth noting, that you may explore different platforms and tooling that give you the ability to right size within the same instance family or offer cross-family right sizing recommendations as well. And all of this will depend on what type of cloud environment you have. Also, if you're looking at right sizing resources across multiple clouds versus one cloud. So definitely an opportunity here to take advantage of improving efficiency and achieving savings. The fourth tactic here is focused on commitment-based discount management. And I want to emphasize it's not just purchasing these discounts. You do have to effectively manage them throughout their entire life cycle. And there are many platforms like Ternary that can help you do that. And these commitment-based discounts can be, resource-based like reserved instances or reservations, or spend-based such as savings plans. And again, each of the cloud providers has their own nomenclature and flavors of these commitments. Google, for example, is committed use discounts. Within each of these commitments, they are typically 1 or 3 year term commitments. And the great thing about these is that you can get up to 70% savings compared to on-demand rates for these services in some cases. So really great opportunity here, but I do want to also mention, we are of the mindset to right size before you reserve or commit. Very important. You don't want to purchase these commitments and then, right size the resources and not have them be covered by those commitments. And so that would be wasteful, which is why the and manage part of this best practice is really crucial as well. So over time, throughout the term of the commitment, you can track the utilization of that commitment. And perhaps in some cases, you want to exchange that commitment. Amazon EC2 convertible reserved instances is a great example of that. So if you are using something that is underutilized, you can exchange it for something that will be better suited to your environment and what your resources you are running. And lastly, want to touch on re-architecting applications, also maybe referred to as architecture modernization. And this one is going to be extremely specific to your organization. Definitely no one size fits all here, but there are a couple of considerations to take into account. Were your applications created in the data center and migrated to the cloud? Or perhaps are they cloud native applications? Is your environment containerized? Are you using serverless architecture? What is your cloud strategy? Are you operating primarily in one cloud or do you have a multi-cloud environment? Or perhaps you're looking to migrate to additional clouds or you're still migrating additional workloads over to your cloud of choice. Be prepared in this conversation to have a lot of trade-offs between cost, speed, and quality, as well as what's being called the new FinOps iron triangle of AI, carbon, and costs as well. You'll definitely need to bring in, some key stakeholders here from your enterprise architecture or cloud architecture teams to work hand in hand with your FinOps practitioners, your engineering teams. And then again, because these can be a significant undertaking of re-architecting your applications, you may also want to bring in procurement, finance, and your executives before making any of these significant changes as well. So definitely a lot of cross-functional opportunity here to work with stakeholders across your company to achieve cloud cost savings. And a bonus tactic for today is about anomaly detection. And so anomaly detection isn't usually thought of as an optimization technique, but if you are very proactive in detecting and managing anomalies, it can be a way to avoid unintended costs. And Hayden and I have both experienced, customers who have all of a sudden seen, thousands of dollars in a spike on perhaps storage or network costs or, compute, all of a sudden. And it's very important to have quick time to detection, as well as the ability to dive into the root cause analysis and investigate those anomalies further. And I will also note that this is a key tactic that may involve other allied personas in your FinOps practice as well. So anomalies could be indicative of broader security issue, for example. Now, if you're listening in and you're a managed service provider, you have the opportunity to layer FinOps across your entire cloud practice. And you can build and deliver differentiated FinOps services across the key domains and capabilities of the FinOps framework, with optimization being one of those domains. And your customers are really going to look to you for a prescriptive approach and a roadmap to success for their FinOps practice. Definitely a lot of opportunity here for you as a partner as well. And Hayden will go through that in the demo and show some of our partner capabilities as it pertains to savings. My last slide before I hand things over to Hayden is talking a bit about the FinOps maturity model and the phases of crawl, walk, and run. You may be familiar with these stages if you've explored some of the information on the FinOps framework from FinOps.org and the FinOps Foundation. But what I really want to emphasize here with this slide is that each of these different techniques can be applied at different phases of maturity. And this is our take at where you may get the most impact from these capabilities and techniques. It is definitely, again, not a one size fits all, and would love to hear some folks' thoughts on whether these are in the right spot for your organization. But starting on the left-hand side here with crawl phase, negotiating those agreements, if you can commit to those agreements with AWS, Azure, Google, those large enterprise agreements for volume licensing discounts, that will benefit you very well in the long run. So the sooner you can do that, the more impactful it'll be to your business. Eliminating zombies, I have it kind of straddling the crawl and walk phases here. This is one that is a low-hanging fruit tactic. It could definitely go into the crawl phase, or it could be that bridge connecting you into your walk phase of maturity. Right sizing and commitment management. Folks like to talk about optimization with these two, paired together. And I have seen, publications and things of people debating, whether to right size before you reserve or vice versa. Again, we are of the mind to right size before you commit. That's why I have the commitment management starred here. So definitely, take that into account. And, we see a lot of benefit here in the walk phase of maturity. And then as you are bridging that walk and run phase and your organization is getting more mature in your cost transparency, your reporting, your optimization techniques, anomaly detection will be really key here because your FinOps practice may appear to be overall fairly stable. You have your FinOps team in place, you have the reporting and visualizations you need, and then all of a sudden there's a $40,000 anomaly and you need to go investigate and tackle that. And so as your organization's more advanced in FinOps, something like anomaly detection will be more impactful on your cost savings later on in your life cycle and your journey. And then lastly, re-architecting. This is not an easy undertaking by any means. It requires a lot of time and commitment and conversations internally with your organization. And there may be very good reasons for why your architecture is built the way it is. And so you really may not get to this until what would be more of a run phase of maturity. As you're just building out the FinOps team, if you go to your executives and say, "Hey, I want to re-architect the whole product," you might get some funny looks and kind of laughed at a little bit of, well, let's dig into our data a bit more. Let's understand our consumption, forecast accurately, and do some of the other capabilities before immediately jumping to let's re-architect. So again, this is just our take on where some of these techniques can benefit you the most. Definitely open to hearing others' thoughts on this. And with that, I will kick things over to Hayden to walk through how Ternary can help you implement these cost savings techniques.
So as Marie mentioned, we are going to be kind of walking through those different phases that we had just covered off on. And again, my name is Hayden Singh. I'm a senior solutions engineer here. I've been in the FinOps space for around 7-ish years, and I've been at Ternary for about 2.5 years now. So I've worked with a lot of customers throughout my time, and oftentimes we're running into the most important things that customers run into or they would like to walk through is, hey, how can we start to negotiate those EDPs or those discounts with those cloud vendors? And that's going to be our first section that we're going to be walking through here. And so this is just a standard dashboard that we see here within Ternary that we built out. And this is going to be something that's helping us understand, hey, where do we sit today versus where we sat, historically, previously throughout the year, or maybe even last year, and what can we do to have those conversations with those cloud providers? And so this is showing us things like, hey, what are the savings opportunities that are available in the platform? Any credits we're already pulling in here, but ultimately understanding what my net cost is versus this year versus last year, and helping us have that conversation and drive those conversations with not only our finance team and internally, but also being able to bring that up with those cloud providers and mention to them, hey, we have spent X amount of dollars over this past year. We are a large consumer of specific services. Maybe it might be something along the lines of compute services, or maybe we're a large storage user. So because of that, we'd want to have a pretty nice discount that's associated with it from there. And in this dashboard, that kind of helps us understand, what's our gross margin versus our net cost here. So our actual costs that are coming in versus the net costs, anything after our existing discounts. And we can click into any of these different bar charts to allow us to start to drill in even further and maybe start to figure out what's causing the largest spikes in our spend. Now, by doing so, this then will allow you to have that conversation with any of those cloud providers to start to negotiate a higher discount flow that's coming in from there. And it's relatively easy to jump into any of that. You'd be able to click into any of these widgets here, pull up a quick report, and then maybe start to add in things like, hey, what are the services that are being consumed there? So this way you can start to really, really drill into it and figure out, why are we having these spikes in our spend, right? So when we look here, we see that compute engine and Elastic EC2 is our largest cost drivers there. And we know we're spending almost $1 million every single month within just compute engine by itself. And in EC2, we're at around almost $1 million, anywhere between 885,000 to almost $1 million there. So that warrants a really good conversation to take back to the cloud providers and say, hey, we are a very large spender. What can we do and how can we work together to build a partnership here so that way we'd be able to not only benefit from some of your discounts, but also by being able to, continue to move forward and work together there. So it makes it a really quick, easy at a glance to be able to have those conversations and not only take those conversations back to the cloud providers, but then also internally reflect that and show, hey, we've pulled in 7.7 million credits just this year alone. And on top of that, here's the realized savings and or savings that we captured just over the last 30 days. So it really just fosters those conversations where within your FinOps organization that you can say, not only are we capitalizing on savings, not only do we have available savings for us, but we're also pulling in all of those discounts that we've been able to negotiate down to just help us in our cloud journey. And then even looking at things like, hey, what's our operating margin revenue, right? Again, looking at that cost versus net cost, you can see our actual cost is almost $1 million a week, but with our negotiation tactics and with our discounts that we're pulling in, we're actually around $500,000 on some of those week by week basis. So we're able to have those conversations once again and then be able to kind of foster that long term. And then being able to take a look at things like your applications or even just your AWS costs and track those budgets over time to see, exactly what that looks like and where you're going to be potentially ending up there. Now, once we've had those conversations, once we've been able to pull in some of those discounts and get some of those pricing agreements in place, then as Marie had mentioned, the very next step that we'd like to touch on is eliminating those zombie resources. And that's where we're going to be able to look at things like the compute engine, right? And oftentimes in your compute resources, you'll find the most amount of savings that are tied to eliminating waste, so to speak. And in this particular scenario, we have quite a few different things that we can do here. So we have things like unattached storage volumes or even zombie instances. And it's fairly simple to be able to take a quick look. We know that this is a persistent disk, so it's not attached to a compute instance. So maybe we want to go make that change, and we can go action in on that. Now, in Ternary, there's a couple ways we can do this. We have the change status here, which will say, hey, this was accepted or as designed, or maybe this was inaccurate. So you don't necessarily need to go action on this. But if it's been implemented, then we can assign it to an implemented, and it'll become one of those realized savings that we saw on that previous widget that we were just touching on. But maybe this was something we want to snooze, and we know that it's nothing too serious. So let's take a look at it and revisit this conversation again in 2 weeks. So I could set up a snooze notification and then take a look at this on November the 1st. Now, finally, the last thing we can do here is create a case. And so this is where it allows us to start to hold individuals accountable, but I could create a case around this specific recommendation and say, hey, I want to have someone go or I want to have somebody go, delete this unattached storage volume and get rid of it. I could assign this to an individual, select the particular person I want to have go action in on this, and then I could link this to Jira. So there's a bi-directional workflow between both Jira and Ternary. So any updates made in my Jira ticket would reflect in Ternary, and any updates I make in Ternary would reflect in Jira. And this would be an optimization task here. So, and this will start to bleed into that the run phase and a little bit where you're looking at re-architecturing your applications, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. Now, that's just one of the different examples here. There's also different examples like, those zombie resources as Marie had mentioned here. And so when we look at zombie resources, we see we have about 8 pages worth of zombie resources that we could probably go in here and get rid of that is just causing us a large amount of spend. And when we start to look through some of these different pages, you'll see, it's a couple of dollars here and there, 27, but then some of them are almost $1,000 just hanging out there that we could absolutely go action on. And it's very minimal amount of CPU being used. So let me create a case around this. Let me send this off to someone to go look at, and then they can go and start to shut off all of these different zombie resources and start to say, get some of that low-hanging fruit there. Now, after we've went ahead and gotten rid of some of those unattached storage volumes, some of those zombie resources, then now is where we start to want to look at the next section brought up here that we're going to be addressing, and that's where we're going to be looking at right sizing your resources. Now, there's quite a few different services that are available where we can right size resources. And so I'll just quickly go through some of these here. We have different things like Compute Engine for GCP. In Cloud Run, we could do EC2 for AWS and Azure VMs. When we look at databases, we see Cloud SQL, we see Cloud Spanner. We look at Elasticache, MemoryDB, OpenSearch, and RDS for AWS, and then Azure SQL for Azure. And then if folks are leveraging Snowflake's database, then we can also work with that as well. Under data warehouse, we have Amazon Redshift and GCP's BigQuery. So we can make different recommendations around there. And then again, virtual warehouses for Snowflake. And then in Kubernetes, we are able to make recommendations for GKE and AKS, and soon to be EKS here very, very shortly. And then finally, with respect to storage, we look at AWS S3, EBS, Azure Blob, and then cloud storage for GCP. But to keep things relatively simple, we're just going to be looking at EC2 here. And this is going to be able to show us things like, hey, what's the visibility into our EC2 resources over the last 30 days? So we see things like our last month spend, our total monthly spend, and where we're projected to end up. And we aggregate our costs a few different ways. So we look at things like your instance type, maybe the usage account, the family, or the region that it's tied to. And then when we're looking at and how we're making some of these recommendations is by taking a look at your CPU, your memory, your network, and your disk. And we can look at things like your utilization by the max of the average or the minimum of the average, or even percent 50, 95, or 99 of the actual max. And this will allow us to make some of those recommendations by looking at your CloudWatch metrics and pulling in some of those from AWS. Down below is where you actually see what you're currently consuming, so your inventory that you have today. In this particular instance, if we looked at the M7i family, we can view all of the instances that are tied to the M7i family, and you would see a list of all of the different resources along with the instance units, the utilization, the network in and out, the disk read and write, and then the provisioned RAM there, and then actually what the cost is, what it's costing us over that time period. But when we get to the optimizations, this is what's really important to most folks here. And this is where we're making the recommendations down below to say, hey, this is stuff that we want to go and make a right sizing recommendation on. And there's quite a few, there's 13 pages worth of recommendations that we can go in there and maybe go make those changes. So in this particular case, this is a situation where our current instance is a C5 18X large and it is costing us around $2,600 a month there. Our on-demand hours over the last 30 days are about 160 with an hourly on-demand rate of about $7.59. But if I scroll down here, we will make the recommendation to switch to a C5 9X large, and our estimated monthly cost drops down to about $1,300, and we're saving almost $1,200 there with just looking at by making that change and re-architecting it from there. Or we could even switch to a C5 12X large if we want to be a little bit safer there, and we would have a monthly estimated cost of around $1,758 with saving ourselves about $791 as opposed to that 11 or almost $1,200 there. And then again, we have the ability to either change to select that change status. Now, this one has been accepted, so this is something that we've sent off to our engineering team to go make that change, and we'll have it reflected within our account. And again, you can create a case around that as well, just in case you want to send that off to someone there. Now, these are the low-hanging fruits. These are the things that you want to go work on first before you do any, before you're purchasing or looking at any of your commitments. So the next logical step after you've done your right sizing and you've shut off all those zombie instances is to go and make those commitments, right? And so this is going to be looking at our GCP commitments. We also offer this for Azure and AWS, but we're going to be looking at GCP for the moment and say, hey, whether you want to look at a flex spend or resource-based commitment type, or whether you want to do the 1 years or 3 years, you have all of those options. And we see what our estimated monthly cost, what our current commitments are looking like. We have 100% utilization, which is just phenomenal to see. Seems to be very rare nowadays to get 100% utilization, but we are achieving that. And our estimated monthly savings are about $136,000. We have about 749 recommendations. So if we were to action on all of those different recommendations, we would have an estimated monthly savings of $1.5 million or $18 million throughout the rest of the year. As we kind of scroll down below, we can see things like our on-demand cost, what's coverable, what's existing, what our total spend is, and we can even filter in by those different services that we want to hone down to. Now, when we look at our existing commitments, we see all of our utilization thresholds and where we're sitting today, our hourly spend and our commitments, and our committed vCPU, our RAM, so on and so forth. But by clicking into one of these, I can actually see the commitments that are tied to it and when and how close we are to, expiring. So we have one expiring within the next 2 weeks that we're going to want to go and take a look at because, we may need to go recommit to another 3 year just to maintain where we're historically used to, right? And then it just shows us the other term ends for some of our other ones. You can see that we've recently purchased another or on top of what we already had and the active and canceled status that's tied to it. Now, as we scroll down is where we get to the actual recommendations themselves. And this is where it's going to be taking a look at, hey, based on some of our spending patterns, we are making these recommendations to go purchase some of these different compute engine services or these compute engine commitment plans. And by doing so, we would be able to have a target coverage of around $162 an hour saved, right? Now, the one thing to call out here is that you may see these yellow warning signs, and this is something that is unique and really separates us from other solutions, is that when you see these warning signs, it's actually letting you know that we might be stepping on our own toes here because this is saying, hey, you want to review the existing usage optimization recommendation before implementing this proposal. because this may cause a change and may cause this to be an obsolete recommendation. So what does that mean? This is effectively saying, hey, you have a zombie resource out there that you should go switch off first because it's talking to it. The engine is talking to each other. And it's saying by going to switch this off, you may end up having a change where that recommendation is no longer valid. So this is letting us know that we should go make sure we're right sizing first before you come in here and make any changes because we could be missing out on some potential savings that are available. So these engines do talk to each other. It is saying, hey, let me go reference the right sizing engine first, make sure we've done all of our proper right sizing before coming in here and necessarily purchasing a commitment that could impact that long term. Now, last thing that we're going to be touching on here is looking at the ability to re-architect and looking at anomalies. So when we get to our anomaly detection, this is automatically going to be running in the background. You don't necessarily have to do anything or set this up. This is going to be using machine learning to take a look at your historical spending patterns and say, hey, based on your historical spending patterns, you may have some situations where you want to potentially go and you have a situation where you've had a spike in your spend. And so in this particular instance, this was a situation back on October the 11th where we saw, or October the 7th, where we saw a spike in our data. So we can see kind of what's going on here. We've had some historical spend there, and then we can quickly investigate this anomaly to figure out exactly why this is spiking up. So just by throwing in something like a SKU description, you would actually see the actual line item billing detail of what happened and why that happened. And something I always talk about with respect to anomalies is that, you may have one that's $100 here, $100 there, but at the end of the year, you're going to end up, if you don't action and figure out exactly what's going on, you may end up having, $50,000 worth of anomalies. And it's really the death by 1,000 paper cuts analogy that you often hear. And so in this particular case, that spike that we saw was a meter data transfer out. And in which point we can go and investigate and we can create a case around that anomaly. And this is the first case that I've created around here. And so this is where it's starting to blend in with the ability to use that case management feature. And when we've already dug in, we know it's a measured data transfer out. It was actually an engineering project that was managed by John O'Connor, and we were onboarding a large new customer there. So that we realized, we revisited it a few months later. We saw that we had about a $14,000 spike again. So it was something we wanted to drill back into, and we knew that there was another larger customer coming in there. But this is ultimately allowing us to not necessarily have to configure anything, but if you do want to set up a configuration, you absolutely have that ability where you could create an alert rule and say, hey, based on a specific amount or a specific percentage of that amount, define it to the specific accounts or services or SKUs, and then subscribe to it. So this way you can kind of figure out exactly, what's going on, or even start to track costs for those specific teams and just be able to kind of follow that along there. And that case management workflow is where you're ultimately getting into the ability to start to refactor or re-architect your organization and applications. So everything we've touched on so far is in that crawl and walking phase. But as you're getting into that running phase, there is no specific solution that will absolutely just, help you do all that re-architecturing of your environments. And those are conversations where you're leveraging something like Ternary to understand, hey, where are we spending? Let's start to get some of those discounts in place. Let's start to then build off of those different commitments or those different pricing agreements in place. Let's start to make sure we're right sizing our resources and then going in purchasing those long-term commitments, tracking and making sure we have those anomalies, and then starting to work within the organization to make those changes that we can start to, maybe taper it down a little bit. Now, the last thing I'll touch on, I know we're getting close to the time, is looking at the MSP dashboard. And as a partner or as an MSP, we may have a situation where, hey, we're pulling in all of your clients and we look at the tenant breakdowns and we can understand how much are they spending? And this is where it's going back to being able to help them negotiate or even negotiating with the cloud providers if you're providing that to those and to those customers and work with them to get a better discount. On top of that, you have the ability to see all the different anomalies that are being tied to those different accounts or their different customers, at which point you can investigate any of those anomalies very similarly how we were just looking at it, and then even seeing the savings that are available there. So we can see things like your usage optimizations or even rate optimizations. So these usage optimizations are all of the different right sizing recs that we're making. And then any of those rate optimizations are looking at any of those potential commitments that you could potentially capitalize on. So I know that was a lot of words there, but if folks have any questions at all, I'm more than happy to take them. And I appreciate you all listening in.
All right. Thank you, Hayden, for a great demo. Just want to tie off on a couple of the key points and takeaways from today's presentation. Ternary is a modern FinOps solution for both managed service providers and enterprises. We really pride ourselves on our partner platform capabilities, as Hayden just demonstrated. And there are very, very few solutions in the market that have a multi-tenanted platform for partners. Second, we pride ourselves on the ease of use and user experience for both technical and business personas. So going back to some of those techniques that we touched on, you do want to involve your procurement, your finance teams, product owners, executives, and really have that central FinOps team, or perhaps your team is part of a broader cloud center of excellence. And if you're a managed service provider, perhaps you are acting as the FinOps team on behalf of your customer. So again, a lot of opportunity here to bring in, key personas as well as allied or adjacent personas from different businesses and departments. We also are a multi-cloud platform, and as Hayden demonstrated, we do have optimizations across AWS, Azure, and Google. So all three leading cloud providers have right-sizing capabilities as well as rate optimization and commitment-based discount capabilities. Many of the solutions in the space do not have that feature parity across all three leading cloud providers. And last but not least, we have all this at a fixed price with no overages. We have heard that many people dislike the percentage of cloud spend pricing model. We hear you. And we also have preferred pricing for partners as well. So we don't want you to be surprised by your Ternary bill. We know as customers, you may already be surprised by what you're getting from the cloud provider, and that's definitely something we don't want. So if you're interested in Ternary or learning more about FinOps best practices, we'd be happy to have further discussions with you. All right. With that, we want to thank you for your time today and really appreciate you tuning in for 5 ways to achieve cloud cost savings with Ternary. Thank you.